Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome to Bloomerang Academy. I'm your instructor Ron Newland, and today we're going to be talking about using Bloomerang to recapture lapsing or lapsed donors. If you're watching this class not live with us, but rather watching it on YouTube in the future, use this email address, write to me, I'll make sure you get a copy of my notes. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be focusing on those donors in your database who have not given for a year or more. How to identify them, how to communicate with them, how to re-engage them. And this is all part of Bloomerang's core mission of helping you with donor retention. If you've spent any time at all with Bloomerang, you know that we preach consistently about the statistic that only 20 to 25% of first-time donors ever make a second gift. But once someone has become a repeat donor, the likelihood that they'll continue to give jumps up into the 60-65% range. So the lifetime value of turning a new donor into a repeat donor is immense. And for today's class, we've got some good news from Miracle Max from the Princess Bride, who's going to be helping me teach today's class, who reminds us that even when a donor lapses, there's a big difference between kinda dead and mostly dead, and also between mostly dead and all dead. As Max would say, even mostly dead is still kinda alive. So if somebody hasn't given for over a year, or even more than 2 years, they're not necessarily all dead, gone. But we're going to work today on some magical pills to make sure that your Dread Pirate Robertses in your databases don't slip from kinda dead to mostly dead to all dead. So our agenda today, we're going to spend about 15, 18 minutes on each of the three following topics. We're going to come up with a working definition of lapsed donor using the donor retention wheel on your dashboard. We'll tell you what Bloomerang's default definition is and how you can come up with your own definition. Then we're going to spend some time previewing the relatively new feature that we just rolled out last fall called the Engagement Survey Tool, which is a great way to have what we would call a soft touch with all of your donors before, after their first or most recent gift, and certainly on the anniversary of their last gift if they've gone a year without giving. Talk about how to set those things up. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to customize reports so you can reach out to the different kinds, various levels of lapsing donors, kinda dead constituents. So in other words, we're going to be showing you how to bring out your dead and find out which ones will tell you, I'm not dead yet. So with that, let's get into Bloomerang. After we've finished all of this up, we'll be able to say, hopefully, all right, go have fun storming the castle. So we're in Bloomerang now. This is my sample donor database full of imaginary donations to mostly imaginary people. And what I want to do is start with a little bit of terminology when we're talking about active donors versus lapsed or lapsing donors. And we're going to be focusing a lot today on this gauge in the upper left-hand corner, your donor retention wheel. But let's start with talking a little bit about the difference between member and donor as a way to kind of set an expectation. So most organizations, maybe your organization doesn't even have what you call a membership program, but if you're a zoo or a museum or a community center with a gymnasium or something like that, you've probably got a pretty clear definition that a member is somebody who has paid a dues payment that is good for a year, 365 days or so, and that during that year they've got certain benefits like free admission. that expire if they don't renew. So most people have a pretty clear understanding of what it means to be a current member or a lapsed member. Donor is not quite so cut and dried, and you can come up with your own definition. As we talk about this, another thing I want to talk about in Bloomerang is Bloomerang, in every constituent in Bloomerang on their profile tab, the very top custom field on their profile tab talks about their status, where your options are active, inactive, or deceased. Now, in this case, deceased means what you probably think it does. It's what Miracle Max would say is all dead. It means literally a deceased person. However, our question is, what makes somebody active or inactive in Bloomerang? And the answer to that question is you do. Bloomerang does not automatically mark anybody as inactive. As far as Bloomerang concerns, everybody in your database is either active or deceased, unless you manually and intentionally mark some of them as inactive. But we do have a recommendation. And our recommendation is to use this donor retention wheel as a guide for identifying people who have not given for more than 2 years and change their status from active to inactive. And of course, we'll also talk about how you might want to change. 2 years may not be your choice. We'll talk about that too. But think of it in this term. This is what the donor retention wheel is doing here, is showing you everybody in your database who has a gift within the last 2 years, well, within the 12 to 24 month ago time period. I've got 80 of them, and of those 80, 34 of them, or 42%, have given again in the last 12 months. So, but everybody, all 80 of these people have given at least once, if not more, times in the last 24 months. And so they are what I'm going to use as my definition of my active donors. Think about this when you're putting together your mailing list. So if you're doing mass mailings of newsletters or event invitations, and obviously you want to include everybody who would qualify as a member because they've given in the last 12 months, but you probably, I would think, probably don't, would also find benefit in mailing those things to everybody who made a donation. I would say in the last 24 months, they're all active. That's our recommendation, is that you include in your basic mass mailings everybody who's given in the last 2 years. And maybe for you, you want to go back 3 years. But the point is, at some point after 24 months since their last gift, you might want to consider marking donors as inactive and not mailing them everything. Doesn't mean you delete them, doesn't mean you lose their records. It just means, in fact, you probably want to continue to communicate with your lapsed donors, people whose last gift was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, just not as frequently. Kind of sends the wrong message if you're spending a huge amount of printing and postage on people who haven't given for 3 or 4 years, but you may want to communicate with them once or twice a year, preferably even by email, in a way that says thanks for your past support, and we thought you'd be interested in knowing about these recent developments. Now, I would say that once people are in that category, they've been 24 months, or maybe in your definition is longer, since their last gift, Miracle Max might consider them mostly dead. And again, Miracle Max would say mostly dead is still partly alive. But for the rest of this session, we're going to focus more on those people who are still on your active list, even if they haven't given for 13, 18, or 23 months. So these are the people in the light part of your donor retention circle, and these are the people that, for my purposes, I'm not going to call lapsed donors, I'm going to call lapsing donors, and Miracle Max might call kinda dead. Now, really quickly, before we get into the nifty technological stuff, I want to take a second here and show you a couple of cool resources that are available to, well, not just to you, to anybody really, on our main public website. So let's click up here and go to the basic Bloomerang website. This is, this is not the website that you have to log into. This is what anybody can find just by going to bloomerang.co. In the upper right-hand corner, we've got a category of things called freebies with some ebooks and some templates and some research and a blog. And there's a question mark up here. Now, so I just want to make sure I don't fail to tell you about this. Let's look here really quickly. If you can use the search button, type in lapsed donor as a topic that you're interested in seeing, and you'll be able to see all kinds of our published resources here. A template, well, we're going to see this in a little bit here, a template for surveying your lapsed donors, a link to a downloadable ebook by one of our many consulting partners. No, actually, this is by our own Stephen Shattuck. A blog post that you don't even have to download. Just click on it and read it. So, in addition to all the expertise on our own staff here at Bloomerang, we work with fundraising consultants all over the country who have taken the time to learn our product, feel good about it, are comfortable promoting it, and give us all kinds of content that they sell to their customers for money, but you can read it for free on the Bloomerang website. Just always like to remind folks of all those great resources that are out there. So, there's some great advice in these resources on some of the language you might want to use in your communications with lapsing donors. In a 1-hour webinar with 150 different Bloomerang customers, there's no way that any of us here at Bloomerang are going to be able to scratch the surface of telling you what your message should be. Hopefully, though, if you read some of these resources, you'll find some things that come in useful. What we're focusing on today is the process of using Bloomerang's technology to get to the folks that you want to talk about. So let's get back into my Bloomerang database. And let's dig a little bit here into my donor retention wheel. So, as I said, our definition of a current retained donor are those people that show up in this dark part of your circle. These are people who have given at least once in the last 24 months, that's the whole circle, and this 42% of them have given at least one more time in the last 12. Everybody in this part of your circle is a repeat donor. Every one of them, therefore, is at least probably, on average, 60% likely or more to give again and again and again and again. Real quick reminder here, the donor retention wheel is not the be-all and end-all. It's not a comprehensive summary of everybody in your database. It's not including people who are prospects that have not given at all. It doesn't include people whose last gift is more than 2 years ago. In fact, it doesn't even include people who are new first-time donors in the last 12 months. So don't think of this as the comprehensive summary of everything you need to know about your database. We call this a dashboard. Don't think of this dial may not tell you how fast you're going, but like your fuel gauge, it's a really good way of knowing how soon you got to get to the gas station. So, if the darker part of the circle on the left are your retained donors, your repeat donors, then the lighter part of the circle on the right is the people that we really want to focus on today, which is your what I'm going to call, for today's purposes, your lapsing donors. These are people where it's been at least 12 months, not quite 24 months since their last gift. What I'm calling lapsing donors, what Max might say, kinda dead. Real quick, let me use this point to say, all this conversation, don't use this term lapsing or lapsed donor in your communications with them. Most people, as we'll see from some statistics here, don't think of themselves as lapsed donors. Most people vastly underestimate how long it's been since the last time they made a gift to an organization. So you don't ever want to communicate with somebody and say, hey, deadbeat, where was your last gift? But for internal purposes, it's useful to think of these folks as people that they've gone from, they're starting to get into a little bit of a danger zone. You don't want to get to 2 whole years since their last gift. All right, so I imagine you're all thinking now, this is great, glad, super data, and glad to understand what those things are. Who are those people? And so here's something pretty nifty. Once upon a time, back in the dark ages, we had a whole class teaching you how to build the reports from scratch to see these people. Now these are what we call clickable reports. Just put your cursor over the dark side of the circle, click it, and you're going to get a list of who those 34 constituents, listed by household, are that have given at least once in the last year. An alphabetical list with the date of their last transaction and the amount of that last transaction. And of course, you're getting the whole report, so it's complete. You've got access up here to the filters, so you can see, click on them and see how the filters actually read. And at some point, you're going to maybe, if you want to, make some edits to these things. You can also add columns to this report. So for instance, as I said, everybody in this report is at least a repeat donor. So let's actually see, in addition to the amount of their last gift, let's add a column for what their lifetime revenue is. It's going to show up on the right-hand side here, but you can drag and drop it over so it's easier to read. And here you'll be able to see, so once again, for everybody whose last gift was 12 to 24, for everybody who's a retained donor, you can see not only was their last gift, with the amount of their last gift, but how much they've given lifetime. So nobody on this side of your circle is a first-time donor. You can see for every one of them what their last gift was, but what they've given lifetime. All right, that's all great, and actually that's really useful for some other classes that we teach, but today our focus is on really the other side of that circle. Let's go back to my dashboard. We really want to be focusing today on the light side of the circle. Let's see who is everybody who has a last gift that was more than 12 months and a day ago, less than 24 months ago. Once again, when you click on it, these are the people that Miracle Max might consider to be moving from, moving into the kind of dead category. Yeah, Ingrid's got a really good question. Yeah, absolutely. What you would do is just create a report of everybody who, with a transaction, with a constituent report, where the filter has transaction, or where the last transaction date is prior to whatever you want to do, whether that was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Export that report. That report's going to come to you with account numbers. Then you turn around and import again that file with a column for the account number and a column for status, where you've changed the status from active to inactive. And it's, first time you do it, open a live chat. We'll talk you through it. But once you realize, once you're accustomed to doing it, something you can update your database with a mass import once a month, 3 times a year, and it's going to be about a 5-minute process once you're comfortable with it. So what we got here is my alphabetical list of what I'm calling lapsing donors. We can see it's an alphabetical list, but their last transaction date in every case is more than a year ago. But less than 2 years ago. Nothing in here that is more than 2 years ago. All right, and once again, you can also add columns to get more information. How many of these people are one-time donors? How many of them are multiple-time donors? All kinds of ways to edit this report. The other thing I want to show before we move on to the next section is that Bloomerang lets you, let's go back to my dashboard. Bloomerang lets you customize your donor retention wheel in a few different ways. And you do that by going to this little gearbox in the upper right-hand corner of the donor retention wheel panel. So here in the upper right-hand corner, you've got 3 options for changing your date range. Our default solution is we're always showing you a 365-day rolling year, and I personally think that's the most useful thing to do with it. But some of us like to change it to a fiscal year or a calendar year. So if we were to change my database to a calendar year and refresh the results. Yeah, okay, and my calendar year might change. Actually, I'm not vastly different. But yours might be vastly different. Because obviously, honestly, what happens the first time you go to the first time you change your database to going to a calendar year, then on January 1st, you're going to be at 0%, and it's going to take you the entire year to build your retention rate up to a percentage that is comparing to what everybody else in Bloomerang is doing, where you're looking at 12 months you're looking at the past 12 months versus the previous 12 months. The other things you can do, some of these actually may be a little bit more, more common than that. So, for instance, you can exclude certain funds. Exclude gifts to your endowment fund, for instance. Those, frequently gifts to endowment funds are one-time things. Maybe from an estate gift, you're never going to get it again. It's not fair to punish yourself for counting a planned gift from last year as not having been renewed, right? Another good example here, maybe you want to exclude gifts and pledges to your capital campaign. So maybe you've got some of the money that's coming in for your organization are pledges, 3rd and 4th and 5th year pledges from a capital campaign you did 4 years ago. It's great to have the money coming in, but are we really sure that those donors are currently engaged, or are they just playing out the string? You'll see when I changed that to exclude gifts to my capital campaign, my numbers went down from 34 out of 80 to 33 out of 73. My percentage actually went up. Interesting. So these are just ways to customize your database. The final thing that you may want to think about very seriously in customizing your donor retention wheel is whether to include soft credits or not. Our default solution does not include them, but you may want to. Now, soft credits are, in Bloomerang speak, fundraising speak, those gifts that come through third parties, or a way of tracking gifts that come through third parties, but are as a result of the action or decision of another donor in your database. So most typically, we're talking here about matching gifts from employers, or we're talking about like gifts from family foundations and donor-advised funds at community foundations. So if you've got some significant donors, even board members, for whom their most common way of making a gift is to give through their family foundation, you don't, you're going to credit that gift to the family foundation, but you want to make sure that you're also soft crediting them and showing their soft credit, counting that soft credit in your donor retention wheel. You don't want a donor, a board member, who is giving to you once a year through their family foundation to appear to be a lapsed donor. So that would actually be something you might want to consider pretty seriously. So, now let's go ahead and move on and take a look at this cool recent feature called the Donor Engagement Survey. Just launched this last fall, and actually I'm really excited to have more people sign up and start getting more and more data on what comes out with it. But essentially what we offered last fall was the opportunity, a new feature that you get to down here under emails. It allows you to set up an automatic email that once you set it up, you don't even have to think about it. It's going to go out automatically on certain, triggered by certain events, to ask your recent donors or your 1 year ago lapsing donors some questions about how they feel about your organization, your communications with them, and things like that. So if you want to take a look, if you want to set this up, or just take a look at how they work, go to email functions down the left-hand side, the ampersand, and it's the second thing down here, engagement surveys. The first time you set this up, if you've never set them up, when you click on engagement surveys, you're not going to see this. What you're going to see is a screen that says, a blank screen with a big blue button in the middle that says, you have, your first engagement survey is waiting to be set up. You'll click on that blue button. It's going to give you 3 options. Those 3 options are new donor survey, existing donor survey, and lapsed donor survey. You can activate all 3, any 1, or any 2 of them. So when you have activated them, you're going to and started using them, you're going to get a screen that looks like this, and we'll take a look here at. We'll come back to this in detail a little bit more once you've seen what we're talking about here. But so, for instance, the new donor survey. If I were to configure it now, when you click on new donor survey, you're going to see the text of a sample survey that when you activate this, Bloomerang is going to send this out a few days after each new donor's first gift. And it's going to have a message in it that says, "We can't do this without you. Dear informal name, your support of our mission means so much more than we can convey. Without you, here's where you tell what your purpose is, would not be possible." You can click on this, edit. You can edit these messages however you want. And what we're going to be doing is sending out this email. And just like any other Bloomerang email, you can also edit the styles. You can change the color scheme. You can add images. You can edit this any way that you edit any other mass Bloomerang email. You're going to be sending this out as I said, a few days after each new donor's first gift. Once it's activated, it's automatic. Obviously, only going to people who have email addresses. And it's going to give them a hot link to a button where they can begin a survey. You want to see what that survey looks like? Let's go up to the top here. We'll preview the survey. And it's going to look like this. Series of questions on their impression. Your organization name has a high level of integrity, 1 to 7. Can be counted on to do what's right, 1 to 7. I trust to deliver the outcomes it promises, 1 to 7. And here we get into specifics. I was thanked appropriately. Overall, I'm satisfied with how they have treated me as a new donor. I believe I've done the right thing. I care passionately about the work, etc. So these are the questions. It should only take them a couple of minutes to answer these things on a scale to 1 to 7. And these are the questions that Bloomerang lets you reach out to your new donors with if you activate this feature. I can anticipate your next question, and that is, are these questions editable? And the answer to that is no. We've been working with people who do surveys for a living to create a set of questions so that your results correspond with an aggregate that we'll be assembling as years go by, so you can compare your results to other results rather than just saying, well, these were my questions, I don't know how that compares to anybody. But now, and obviously, if you don't want, the entire thing is optional. And you've always been able to, if you want to go to the effort of it, create your own surveys in an instrument like SurveyMonkey and use Bloomerang's mass email feature to send out a survey. But what these are going to do is make it automatic and give you a standardized set of answers to respond to. Let's back up again. Next question. So how often, who do these go to? Your new survey, your new donor survey, Bloomerang is going to look at the source of the new gift and its acknowledgement status. So essentially, if you are sending out, anybody who makes a new gift online, and you've got a customized Bloomerang acknowledgement email that goes out immediately, those people are going to get the survey 2 days later. 2 days after their first gift, after which they have been acknowledged with your customized email, they're going to get this survey. Everybody else is going to get their survey 2 days after they've been acknowledged. Once you've generated an acknowledgement letter, and the gift the gift record gets flipped from acknowledgement status is no to acknowledgement status is yes. 2 days later, they get the email. Or 15 days after the gift is entered, they're going to get this survey. So this, that's kind of a warning sign there. If you don't have a good structure in place where you're thanking people within a week of their gift, turning on this survey is something you may not want to do until after you've got your system in place where you're thanking people on a regular weekly basis. Because, frankly, we figure sending out a survey like this 15 days after a gift is ample time for them to have been thanked. And if they're not being thanked, well, frankly, it may be a rare person who's falling through the cracks because of something about your system, and you want to be able to fix that crack. That's the new donor survey. We've also got then the existing donor survey, which I've already set up. When we click on that, we'll see the language is slightly different. Now, this is something that's going to go out to, again, 2 to 15 days after every existing donor makes a second gift. It's not going to go out any more than once every 6 months. So people who give a monthly gift, or they're really, really regular, and they give you maybe once, they come to every event, and they're going to show up with a donation on their timeline every 2 months, 3 months, 6 weeks, 2 months. They're not going to get a survey after every gift. But after the first gift in each 6-month time period, they will get this survey where it says your continued support means more than you know. And asking them to, again, to take a couple of minutes, 3 minutes, to answer a survey. These questions, once again, you go up to the top to preview your survey. And here you'll see there are 15 different questions. They're all the same questions, plus some additional ones that let you identify some things like I feel a sense of intimacy, which you would not expect from a first-time donor. I am always thanked appropriately. Communications from my database always meet my needs. Fundraising communications are always appropriate in style or tone. What you're getting here is some feedback that lets you, kind of get a sense of how people are interpreting and responding to your messaging. So let's go back one more page, look at the final option here, which is what we would call for today's purposes, the lapsing donor survey. Already got one in here. Once we've activated it, you can open it. You'll see. Now, there's no language in here. You'll notice from what we said earlier, there's no language in here that calls this person a lapsing donor. It says your support made a big difference, past tense, but I'm not necessarily going to, take any umbrage at that. You mean so much to Ron's, to this database. Your organization, your opinion is important. Answer just one question. There's nothing in here saying, hey, deadbeat, it's been over a year since your last gift. We want more money. It's just saying, you mean so much. Tell us what you think. At which point, they begin the survey. Let's take a look at what this survey is. Very simple. One question. I am still an active donor. It's not saying you're a lapsed donor. It's just saying which of these things are true. And some people will say, I am still an active donor, but I felt pressured into giving. Or, I'm still an active donor, but I was not thanked appropriately for my gift. A lot of these things are going to be kind of hard to read. But remember, this is going to people who have not given to you for 12 months, 13 months, for 12 months or more. In fact, when you first turn it on, it's not going to go to every lapsed donor in your database. It's not going to go to people whose last gift was 3 years ago. But at the day you turn it on, it's going to go to everybody in this part of your circle. And then after that, it's going to just go every day to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 new people that are just now reaching that 12-month cycle. But if they go to the 12-month cycle, they may have, by that point, have failed to respond to 2, 3, 4 solicitations. If you do a year-end appeal, if you invite them to a gala, if you invite them to a golf tournament, and 3 or 4 gifts, of those solicitations have gone by since your last gift from them, and they've not responded to any of them, they get this. This is an opportunity for them to tell you, you ask me too much, you ask me too often, you pressure me into giving. You didn't tell me how my money was used. Or maybe just say, nah, hey, I'm cool. I'm sure I just gave the other day. I'm great. And that's all good. That's good feedback too. So remember, let's focus a little bit here on the 2 real major purposes of these surveys. One is that they are cultivating your donors. That's what we would call a soft touch. Never hurts to ask people, what do you think? Whether they respond or not, there's nothing about the language in these surveys that should cause anybody to think of anything other than, good. I appreciate them asking this question. I bet Jennifer's asking my next. Now, when they finish filling out the survey, no, they're not actually redirected back to your website. That's actually a good. That's an interesting suggestion, Jennifer. I'll probably pass that on. But What it does do, finish this thought, which is that the other function it does is going to give you an overall aggregate reading on what people think. It's not. Now, so let's get into how do I see what people are telling me. And so let's go back now to my email function and to my engagement surveys. And you'll see once you've got them activated, you're going to get a graph at the top that shows for your existing customer, for your new customers, your new donors in green, what the average score that they're telling you is for their trust, for their commitment, for their satisfaction. And then in blue, for your existing customer surveys on a scale of 1 to 7, 4.5, 5.0, 5.3, and of course only your existing customers are asked those 5 additional questions that let them evaluate your intimacy with the organization. These are all aggregate numbers. You don't know which donor called you a 7 and which one gave you a 4. However, on the upper right-hand corner, we've got your top lapsed responses. Where you're going to see, the responses where they're saying the reason was because I switched to a different charity. I was not thanked appropriately. Sorry, I just can't afford it anymore. Or, I'm fine. I'm still an active donor. What you're going to actually find, what we are finding, is that this is overwhelmingly the number one answer. Most people don't think after a year that they are. I mean, they have not chosen to stop supporting you. They just don't realize how long it's been since their last gift. Now, the other things you can do with these reports, there's a couple of other different ways of getting to see who got them. If we open up our existing donor survey, even though we don't get an aggregate, a specific total, aggregate total, you can always use your tracking tab to see each one that was last sent and when it was sent. Click on delivered and see who it was delivered to. And you'll be able to see eventually which ones actually, of course you'll see some of them, this is all sample data with imaginary people called things like existing to donor, but eventually you'll see some people actually didn't open them. And you'll see some people open them but didn't click the link or take the survey. But this is how you see, and once again, you can click on responses and get a little bit more of detail here on the aggregate totals of the different questions, and then where you are on each question. This question got only a 3.5. This question got a 4.75. This question got a 5.4, etc. Where you really, I think, going to want to use this the most, the aggregate totals for your new donors and your existing donors are going to give you some good hints about how effective your communications are and where you may want to make some changes. The really big one is that for your lapsing donor survey, in this case, we do let you know what each donor is telling you. So you have the opportunity now to go to tracking and see that I had 11 people sent this email, 8 of whom opened it, 7 of whom clicked the link. And when I open up the link, back up a step here. When I look and see who opened it, there I've got the name of the donor. Now I can actually open that donor's record in a new tab and actually see the response to their question. Which was I wasn't thanked appropriately for my gift. Donors do not have the option of donors have the option of unsubscribing from your emails as a whole. Um, um, Actually, Audrey, that's a good question about whether or not you may be able to. There may be a feature in Bloomerang that lets you give people, if you've done this, you know that Bloomerang's mass email feature has a manage email interests that lets people say, I want your emails, I want your newsletters, but not your volunteer information. So let me check and see whether it's possible to make surveys one of those things that they can opt out of without totally unsubscribing from all of your emails. I'm making a note about that, and I will send you a separate email later. Samantha's question, yeah, so earlier, no, these are not editable surveys. These surveys are they're built to a standard created by one of our co-founders, Adrian Sargent, about whom I'm going to talk more in a minute. The goal is for everybody to be collecting data that's comparable to other data collected in response to the same questions. Another thing you can do here is you can create a report. So let's create a new report. And what we want to see here is a report from scratch that is a list of interactions, where we're going to add a filter for interaction, where the channel is engagement survey. This means not only did they get, it's not just they got a survey email, but they actually participated in the survey. Okay, save that. I've got 22 people who've responded to my email survey, and where the subject of that interaction contains the word lapsed. With those two filters, I've now got a list of the 12, in a single report here, the 12 people who have responded to one of my surveys and given me a response. And what I can also do here now is add a column. Let's add a column for lapsed reason. And here I see, didn't seem to need my support. I didn't enjoy the communications. They wrote to me too often. I switched to a different charity. Said a lot of these things are not the most happy things in the world to read. But they do give you the opportunity to either make an evaluation on this person and say, this person has lost their job and no longer believes in our mission and may not be worth continuing to bother. Or maybe this is somebody that you might want to go have a conversation with and say, we're sorry, I'm not sure what happened. Let me make it right. Because, as I mentioned earlier, all of this is based on the research of Adrian Sargent. I still remember the first time I heard Adrian Sargent speak 20 years ago, and a somewhat humorous point that he made, that he said, the customers who rank you highest in terms of their own brand loyalty are not the people who have never had anything but routine, expected, good experiences with you. Your highest donor loyalty is from people donor loyalty, brand loyalty, is from people who have at some point reported some dissatisfaction and had it addressed. So the first time I heard Adrian speak, he made this he was joking, of course, but he said, so maybe the best thing to do is to screw up a little bit with everybody and then fix it. He was joking, of course, but the point is, if you're going to use these tools in Bloomerang, don't shy away from following up and doing the hard work that can turn a donor that may be going away into one of those loyal recurring donors that gives 60%, 70% forevermore. Karen's question about can this be made a template? Sure. Save it. Just give it a name. Now, once you've saved it, it's always going to be current. Now, maybe what you want to do, in fact, here, if you're doing this over months and months and months, and you don't want to have to look back through every interaction you've ever had, just always say, interaction. We're only looking for those interactions that are engagement surveys of, with lapsed, where the date of that interaction is during the previous 90 days, maybe. That way you're not constantly looking at every response to your survey since you turned it on. And then you just save that, and you've got it to just open up anytime you want to. All right, a few more things I want to cover in a few more minutes here. These are all great tools, whether you use them or not. You got to remember that not all of your constituents, frankly, have email, right? And not all of them are even going to respond to this. So let's also talk about what else you can do with Bloomerang to be identifying and capturing those folks that are moving into the kind of dead and onto the mostly dead category other than our surveys. So let's go back to our dashboard. And we're going to use that click-through feature again to look at all those donors in that light part of our circle. So this is, once again, these are 40 households whose last gift was between 12 and 24 months ago. I want to turn this into a report that identifies only those donors whose last gift was between 12 and 13 months ago. In other words, these are the people who are just now moving from active to kind of dead. So what we can do here is we can simply click on this first filter and edit it. So we're looking for constituents. We are including anybody. Let's go to the exclude filter. Back up one more step here. We're going to look at our list of our lapsing donors. We are including anyone who has any specific transactions. Where the date is during the last year. Alina's question about customizing the time of day. No, it's going to go out shortly after your database refreshes. Your database refreshes every night about 2 a.m. and sometime between 2 a.m. And 8 a.m. the emails are going to be sent. At this point, there's no way to alter that. Going back to my default database. I'm looking at I'm including anybody who had a gift in the last year. And then instead of saying what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this first filter from date is last year to date is during. The previous 700, instead of the previous 730 days, I'm changing this to the previous 395 days. So I'm including everybody whose last gift was in the last 395 days, excluding anybody whose gift was in the last year, and here are 11 people. Picking up this once again. Including okay, excluding constituents where that have specific transactions where the date is during the previous. Here's what happened here. We changed that there. Okay, I'm sorry. The delay here is coming from the fact that, all right, so here we're looking at, this is what I was expecting for. Yeah, so here's 5 results. Each of them you'll see, last gift was in June of 2018. More than 12 months ago, less than 13 months ago. This is what we're expecting to see. Now, once you've done this, you might want to save this report, give it a name, like monthly report of the newly kind of dead. You never have to change the filters. They're not based on date ranges. They're based on how many days ago it was since their last gift. So if you run this, well, so what you're going to want to do is, so many of you have a series of things you do once a month. Membership renewals, pledge reminders. You may want to add to your task of monthly things that you do on the 1st or the 15th of every month. You may want to add a task for running your reports that identify people who have just become 12 to 13-month lapsed donors, or as we'll see in a minute, people who are just at risk of becoming 24-month lapsed donors. Once you've got this report saved, then you can use it as the filter in a letter that this says, something like, thank you for your support at this time last year. You may even want to add a sentence like, with a gift of, and insert a Bloomerang field for last transaction amount and last transaction date. With a gift of $100 on 6/18/2018. Edit the letter to suit your purposes. Remember, most people that are going to be getting this letter don't think of themselves as lapsed donors. You're not saying that. You're just saying something like, thank you for your support at this time last year. Your goal here is not to maximize the amount of this gift. Your goal here is to make it easy for somebody to go from being a one-time donor to a two-time donor. Once they are a repeat donor, then you got a different list of folks that you may want to start talking, figuring out strategies to get to know them personally. Well, Marcy, actually, you can certainly, once you've saved this report, Marcy, you can add as many additional filters as you want to. Constituent has transactions where the campaign is annual campaign. And that might be worth a call to your customer support rep to make sure you've got it working the way you want to. Let's go ahead and really quickly here, because we are at noon, I want to make sure that I cover two other very quick questions. One is, okay, how do I do this if I am using the surveys? I don't want these letters to go out the same day as my lapsed donor survey is. In that case, you've got the opportunity. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. I'm going to go back to my default dashboard where I am I'm not looking on a roll. I'm looking at a rolling year instead of a calendar year. So what I want to do here now is edit this report to say I want to see people whose previous transaction is not in the previous. Last time we changed 730 days to 395. Let's change that to 425 days ago. That's 14 months ago. Okay? Excluding those people whose excluding constituents whose last transaction was a specific transaction where the date was the previous 395 days. So now we're not looking at 12 to 13 months ago, we're looking at 13 to 14 months ago. With those two changes, we're now looking at only one person. San Francisco catcher Buster Posey is the only person that meets that criteria in my database right now. However, if Buster responded to my survey, then we don't want to send him this letter. We only want to send this to people who either don't have an email address or who got the survey but didn't respond to it. So we'll add one more exclude button here with an or for constituent has interactions. Has any specific interactions where the channel is engagement survey email. If you responded to that email where the date is, if he's responded to that email during the previous, in this case, 60 days is easily going to cover it. 30 days would certainly cover it. Now, okay, so Buster didn't get the email, but with those two, with those two filters, we are now sending this letter. If these are the filters for a email or a letter saying it's been over a year since thank you for your gift at roughly this time last year, knowing that means 13 to 14 months ago, but you're not going to, that you're not sending this to anybody who responded to your survey to either tell you, I don't like how often you talk to me, I can't give any more, I've changed my, so that's the filters you need to make sure you're excluding survey respondents. And the final thing you may want to do here is one more letter, kind of the same thing, but let's look at people at the far, far end of your retention wheel. These are the people that have not given for the last 12 to 24 months. At some point, you're coming up on 24 months. We've been focusing on the people that just went 12, 13, 14 months. Maybe one more thing you want to do once a month is go back to your default report. Let's only look at those people that are in month 24. So here, fine, we'll keep it. The date is the previous 730 days, excluding people whose previous gift was in the previous 700 days. And with this, you've got a list of all of your donors, 7/25/2017. These are all from July of 2017. I got 7 households here where their last gift was 23 months ago. And this would be the recipients for a letter that might say, at this point it's been 2 years. And at this point it might be worth saying, thank you for your past support. And maybe, though, even letting them know that we hope you've enjoyed receiving our monthly newsletters and quarterly event invitations. We hope we want you to know that we value and steward all of our donors' contributions, and so we limit our mass mailings to donors who have given in the last 2 years. A gift at this time of any amount would assure that you'll continue to receive all of our mailings. Otherwise, we'll still value your contribution and probably talk to you by email from time to time. I think after 2 years, it might be worth letting them know that they're not, because at this point they've had 2 years to kind of ignore everything you've sent them and figure, well, they're going to write to me again 2 months from now. After 2 years, I think it's appropriate to, with the right language, say to folks, we value your support. We're good stewards of our donors' money. We're never going to forget you. We'll email you a couple times a year, but we're not going to send you every piece of mail that we send from now on. I think it's a legitimate thing to say, and it's a good way, I believe. Of course, you can set our own expectations about this. So that covers our session for today. Have a great weekend, everybody.